Okay, so let's go through the hands. So strong broadways. These are the non-paired hands that I consider strong enough such that you can raise call from the button for 22 big bets. You know, against loose opponents, you can toss ace 9 in there, you can toss ace 8, maybe even king jack. So this is just approximate. So usually I'm going to raise call these because getting it in against ace x is so nice. If you just shove your ace king, they might just fold ace 2. So versus opponents who like defending and hate restealing, I will just shove my strong Broadway hands. So this is where the 20% is. So the big difference between a hand like ace king versus a hand like pocket jacks, even though they're both powerhouses similarly powerful pre-flop, if you min-raise your pocket jacks and get your opponent to defend their 10-9 instead of folding, this is good for you because they can hit top pair and get it in all in really bad. But with ace king, if they call their 10-9 instead of folding, this is bad for you because it's a lot less likely that they'll get their money in bad in that case. And like even worse, often the board is just going to come 3 low cards and you're just going to be blown off your hand, you know. And it's also rare that you're going to be dominating them with ace king when you get post flop, because with their hands that contain aces, it's either a strong ace, in which case they would have re-raised pre-flop for value, or like even if it's ace x, most players don't like to play those hands post flop, so they would just re-steal them pre-flop. So if you min raise ace king on the button and get post flop, you're usually not dominating them. So if my opponent rarely re-steals anyway and likes defending everything, then I would recommend just shoving these hands instead of min-raising. But of course, usually I would still min-raise them because there's a lot of opponents who, if they see queen jack or ace 2 or jack 9 suited, instead of defending, which is bad for me, they're going to shove, and then I'm going to call with my strong Broadway, and then that's good for me. So another thing to keep in mind is you'd much rather get post flop versus queen jack than 8-7. So once again, the same thing we were talking about before. Good players are more likely to get post flop with queen jack than they are with 7-8. They're more likely to re-steal 7-8 and get post flop with queen jack. So against good players, you should be more incentivized to min raise these instead of shoving. So the reason why you'd rather get post flop versus queen jack rather than 8-7, other than you might dominate queen jack, is queen jack misses the same boards you miss. So you'll win the pot with a c-bet when you miss, and you'll get it in usually good. You know, you might dominate them, or you might have a dominating draw or whatever when you hit. Versus 8-7, they're just going to fold when you hit. When the board comes, if you have king queen and the board comes like queen jack 10, they're just going to fold. And they're going to check raise you when the board comes 6-5-2. When it comes 3 low cards, you're not going to win the pot on a c-bet. So yeah, so here are some bad things that can happen. So obviously getting it in versus a 2-2 that would have otherwise folded is kind of frustrating. So that's another reason to want to shove. So some players, they only re-steal ace x and not king x. Then getting it in king queen versus ace 2 is extremely frustrating. You know, if you have 22 big bets with king queen on the button and it's folded to you, if you shove, they might fold their ace 2. But if you raise call, you actually got it in behind when they re-stole their ace 2. They thought they were on a steal, but they actually got it in the head. And this is really bad for you. But, you know, so if your opponent only re-steals ace x and not king x, then you probably just want to shove your king queen instead of raise calling. So I know back in the day, a lot of players preferred stealing king x rather than ace x, because with king x, they're less likely to be dominated when they're called. But I don't think this is really the case anymore nowadays, because players are getting smarter at calling with king queen. So having to play post flop versus 8-6 suited is also bad, like we explained. So overall, I would still usually raise call those strong Broadway hands, but I did give a lot of arguments for why it's not automatically a raise call. And with hands especially like king queen, often I'm just shoving 22 big bets, and I'm not going to cry about the times I let my opponent get away with their queen jack.